Hello, welcome everyone. We will now begin the Q&A following the film Shy Radicals. Welcome to Švicarija in Ljubljana. I am extremely happy to be joined tonight by two guests. Alongside me is Hamjo Ahsan, the main protagonist of the film. And joining us via Zoom from Great Britain is Tomom Dreamom, the director of the film. Hamja, this film was shown as part of the exhibition in the center of Ljubljana in the gallery at Francoska Revolucija Square. And you're also still promoting the book, which is now in its fifth edition. And this is, of course, as part of your never-ending, correct me if I quote you wrong, never-ending world tour to overthrow extrovert supremacy. Is that right?
And I won't stop until that oppressive ideology is overthrown.
It should be working. It's okay.
Yeah, and I won't stop touring until that oppressive ideology is finally overthrown.
Excellent. So I would just like to emphasize that this will be a very open conversation. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand so I can see you. Anytime during the Q&A, ask questions, feel free to say whatever you want to say. So, Hamja, I would like to ask you in the beginning, in the past 2 years, your work has become quite connected with the city of Ljubljana. So can you begin by saying, how did that relationship with the city and the people of Ljubljana begin?
I was first invited to Ljubljana March 2019 by Slavs and Tatars when they curated the biennial. Basically, since the book came out, my entire life is just fans of my book invite me places and I go there. This building, Švicarija, is actually one of my favorite places in the entire world. I think it's like a headquarters as an introvert utopic place. The beautiful bird chorus in the morning is something so healing and restorative. And hence that's why this building is in the film, and it's quite honoured to do it here. But I think there were moments during this utopic stay in this beautiful house. So they often during summertime they'd have these quite loud weddings where they'd play every single song I hated from the 1990s, like Barbie Girl, until 2 in the morning. And which is also traumatizing. And the way I used to try and heal from that experience is I actually went to the Jose Plesnik house and I learned about his reclusiveness and his arguments with Tito's charisma. And then you see this, you know, people say he designed the city and say Gaudi designed Barcelona, but there's something in the architecture. I'm sure I had many political disagreements with him, and I'm sure he wouldn't like me to some extent, but there's some thread of identity that goes through. For example, I really relate to T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, someone who, the British poet who wrote Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock, or the Japanese writer Yukio Mishima, and they're politically on the opposite spectrum of me, but there's still some aspect of relationality with them. But that, I said that was the same with Plesnik, but I'd spent a lot of time in New York and around Times Square, and like Times Square is like this hyper overbearing, overstimulating place, and I think there's nothing like that in Ljubljana or the whole of Slovenia. But there's something about Alps, lakes, streams, all the green, the forest. I feel like Ljubljana's a place. I've grown up in London my whole life that had this glimpse of. It's almost like bits of it were already in Aspergerstan or something like that. Yeah.
It's quite an honor to have the city so prominently featured in the film. At what point did you decide that this has to be part of your project and part of your film?
Tom came during the closing of the 2019 biennial. I was invited to do a workshop in Droba Vaga around making up nations and utopic nations and fictional nations. I don't know, it just sort of And so it was the installation. So I designed a referendum that went around the whole of the city. And so that infrastructure was still in place, all the ballot boxes, the campaign, the flags. But I mean, there was lots of things. So I went to the Museum of Contemporary History. And I saw the ballot box, the white ballot box for the referendum by which Slovenia votes for independence. So that was an influence on why the final form of the work became a referendum. But I was also shocked that it actually, the referendum where people could vote to separate into this federation at Aspergerstein, we actually won it by, I think, 72%. And that shocked me too. I didn't think it would be a landslide victory. I actually thought it'd either be Brexit, like 48-52, or split, or so. The fact that this silent majority had voted for me to rule over them by a democratic mandate was flattering. But I hadn't been an artist for a couple of years. My whole life was dominated by defending my brother against the British and American state. It was like me versus the CIA, the governments of Bush and Obama, Tony Blair, the Home Office, the right-wing media, which was a bit of a challenge. So I put my art career on hold, and then Slavs and Tartars inviting me to be part of the biennial was my comeback moment. And even the grand prize, that was very much like a phoenix from the ashes moment. I wouldn't be calling myself an artist and still be practicing today if it wasn't for the city of Ljubljana giving, on this stage, this very stage, in I think it was June the 6th, 7 p.m. or something. That's how long I've been a born-again artist. But there's something also in which, like, I think just yesterday I saw 9 separate friends, and I had so many friends within walking distance, 10 minutes walking distance, which is something delightful I experience here, which I do not experience in London. I mean, the last time I was even in New York City, I could finally understand the meaning of why Taxi Driver was set there and why Travis Bickle went crazy, and the loneliness of Midnight Cowboy, and these cities where people are too busy for each other and never have the time or space. But I think there's something in the architecture and city planning, which is the city seems far more breathable, and I feel safe and good here.
Tom, a question for you. Can you hear us?
Yes, hello.
Excellent. Tom, your work is primarily connected with music. So how different of a challenge is it to make a documentary film about activism and a project like Hamja's?
I think I found Hamja's work when I discovered his book. I found it in a small bookshop for introverts where I live in Margate in Kent by the sea. And the bookshop, it actually belonged to an artist, a musician who is called Art School Girlfriend. She ended up making the music for the film. And so in a way, there was still that access point for me. That's how I discovered the book. It was in a bookshop belonging to a musician that had, I suppose, the same sort of interests as Hamja, or there was an overlap there. And when I think the book, when I picked it up, I was just sort of having a casual conversation with her, and then I picked the book up because I liked the cover, to be totally honest. And then when I started reading it, I found it was incredibly visual. Every part of it felt like a really playful, interesting idea. And then when Hamja and I met, and immediately there was a shared interest in music that we both had from the 90s, similar artists we were into. So it was still like an access point in a way. And yeah, I think I have a background in psychology. I studied psychology, and I'd for a long time been wanting to work at like more in depth with an artist. And so when I had the opportunity to Hamjo and he was open to the collaboration, it was something I'd been looking for some time, because projects with musicians are often limited to what they, you know, might have in mind. So yeah, I found it much the same in a way. I just like, there was a greater degree of conversation we were able to have about certain aspects of his work, which I found and still find like really interesting, and how Hamja sort of puts his work across. It's all like the process is fascinating to me as well, and something I really enjoy.
I imagine you're both influenced by very different kinds of literature and films. So did Hamja made you watch certain kind of films and read certain kind of books to get you acquainted with his world?
He did, yeah. There was a really, you know, open process of sharing materials to research and read in the early stages of that process. And there was, yeah, I learned a lot. I think that's the best thing about the work that I do, is that you go on a journey straight away and get to discover this incredible pool of like inspiration that the particular artist or individual is working with. And in Hamja's case, I don't think I've ever met anyone with such a varied pool of influences, that like, you know, there's a sort of playfulness even in like how these influences meet and how they work together. And yeah, you know, a lot of the stuff Hamja sent me, I would never anticipate being sent, or I'm not sure, you know, especially in the order in which it came. It was like, yeah.
The visual style of the film is also very interesting, because you used different kinds of footage. You used anamorphic lenses, I think, and also there's some vintage Super 8 shots. So did you do that with your pre-established style, or did Hamja's way of thinking or seeing the world inform the style of the film?
I have always worked with mixed formats, because I think there's something about shooting. I mean, a lot of the time it comes down to the resources you have available. And I like working in small teams and small crews. And I like working on a like one-to-one basis with people as well. And so I'll always bring a Super 8 camera or a smaller digital camera with me to, so I don't miss anything. And also there's a certain like level of intimacy which you get from just meeting up with someone and exploring an area and having conversations, but then still being able to capture moments from that process, from that afternoon, or from, you know, the visit to a particular place. And that finds its way in the film always. It's always way more impactful, meaningful than when you might have a crew of 30 people and like lights in every window. And, you know, I think I'll always go back to that stuff for like, if something's lacking in feeling, there's like, oh, there's 10 minutes of Super 8 there, like, let's have a look at that. And there's always unexpected moments that work with, you know, what someone is talking about, or feelings they might be expressing. So that's something I like to do and like to experiment with always. And Hamja was totally open to like working like that, I think, because there's a certain DIY approach in that style of filmmaking, which is shared with a lot of the artists or individuals that you know, Hamja sent me. So I think there was definitely it wasn't something that he was opposed to. All of that happened just quite naturally. You know, the way we made it, nothing was that overly considered, apart from the one day where we had a crew and shot some of the scenes that we'd taken from, you know, Hamja's book. the sort of dramatic realizations of things. That took a bit of planning and obviously very considered, but everything else was captured with just myself and Hamja.
There was also a mixture of archival research on my part, in terms of my brother had been in prison for 8 years, so there was all the court papers, there was a news footage, I'd been on all the TV channels, and shifting through that too. I think one film me and Tom think is amazing is the film Amy, about Amy Winehouse. So I don't know, just looking how my family had been covered in media, and I actually my favorite bit in the film is the way Tom captures my mum and dad. Actually, I think came to my house and my mum was, you know, asking where's my grandchildren and why I'm not married and where my wedding is going to be. And I was so like an Asian mum. Yeah, but Tom got something out of them, like the pureness of my mum and dad's heart. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind to say. I think that
there's also all the family photographs as well, and so there's lots of stuff. There's family photos that I hadn't uncovered for years. The court papers were spontaneously put there, and then we made this. I mean, they're the exact court papers from the American courtroom. And Tom also did some very interesting. He went to Belmarsh prison, where Julian Assange is now, and took a very big, risky leap. I don't think you went to Belmarsh prison. I think you sent a assistant there. But it's actually, it'd probably get you arrested to shoot that. It's like Britain's Guantanamo Bay. It's where my brother was with for a number of years. Yeah, and just a little side note, some of the visitors to the Ljubljana exhibition had also been quite involved in the Julian Assange campaign and WikiLeaks, and noticed some of the parallels. In fact, the footage which we spontaneously shot outside the Home Office was actually a protest for Julian Assange. So I've gone on so many different directions. But yeah, I like the way you showed my mum and dad, Tom. They seem so sweet.
Yeah, I think when you, I think that's testament to your mum and dad, really, because they gave a level of like access and trust that, really comes across so beautifully in how they speak. And I think that was testament also to the level of work we had done together up until that point. I wouldn't feel comfortable asking to do that unless we'd had that level of trust, that existed, so that you felt comfortable in inviting us into your home.
Hamja, it's now 4 years since the first edition of the book came out, and 2 years since the premiere of the film. The world has changed incredibly since that time.
Sorry, it's 1 year since the premiere of the film. Sorry.
Okay, 1 year. But still, I mean, the world has changed, and somehow we've all become introverts. We all, we had to stay at home, we had to read books, watch films. Has the pandemic, in a way, reinforced the idea of Aspergistan? The film was actually shot, the final shot was off Chinatown, in Leicester Square, but it was literally the moment Wuhan struck. And Chinatown, which is just around the corner from the busy high street, it was being vacated. And I think there's a whole new body of literature around the book in relationship to lockdown. So Freeze magazine did an article called "Can We Reimagine the Arts Under COVID-19?" But that was the central focus of that article in Freeze was about shy radicals and things like that. And there was a whole meme culture and online subculture around lockdown. So you'd have a picture of an extrovert in lockdown and an introvert looking like they're at peace in heaven. I loved the first lockdown. It was just
beautiful. I don't know, and some of, you know, you realize just the irresponsibility, you know, extrovert supremacy kills, you know, like it spreads, like there were so many, I mean, even here, I was living here during lockdown in March, but there were always illegal rave parties, sometimes by my housemates till 3 in the morning, and sometimes in the park. And that's why we're still in the same state. But there was a whole new body of writing, seeing it as lockdown reading. In fact, there's a particular way I use the film, so I still use it as a curatorial tool. So in The Hague, in the Netherlands, I curate in a series called Solitary Solidarity, and it starts with the film, but then I'm also looking at zine publishing under quarantine. So there was many zines called Quarantine, that were published in lockdown or isolation, or people, and one of the zines which you also see in the prison cell was also called Quarantine, which is a zine I made with a number of former psychiatric patients, because they knew how to cope under enforced isolation or lockdown. But I also, my brother had been in solitary confinement for 2 years, and I did a lot of activist work for prisoners in solitary confinement. That's where you have 50% of suicides in US prisons, and regarded as a form of torture. And there were also a number of oppressive measures under the war on terror. So you have these things called control orders in Britain, where people are just allowed to move within the same, 5 or 6 meters within their own house. But all those people had survived those conditions, had forms of wisdom and knowledge through that confinement. So my brother, a number of human rights organizations had done guides to how to survive quarantine by learning from ex-Guantanamo Bay prisoners or ex-Irish Republican prisoners. I'm wearing a t-shirt of Bobby Sands in the film, which is one of my heroes. People might know from Steve McQueen's Hunger. But they had been in the most confined elements. So yeah, there's a whole new reading. There's also some of the books written about lockdown have written the book. And I was also supposed to tour Italy, because the book has been translated into Italian. And I think Italy was the next hotspot after Wuhan, but the entire tour was cancelled. But I got lots of letters from Italy, from fans and readers saying how it helped them survive, and they felt they were part of some avant-garde change in movements. But I think the whole lockdown made us reevaluate, say, even now what we call these people essential workers, or like how we value labor and people economically, and care.
Do we have a question from the audience?
Okay, so one question I have, Hamja, we talked about it already, but how do you survive as a shy radical within the extreme loud art world, within socializing and so on?
I sometimes feel heartbroken, actually, and defeated. like the award ceremony for winning the election and the grand prize is still like a big socialite forum thing. I know, and I was in Jan van Eyck residency for 1.5 years, which is a post academy in the Netherlands. I just recently came back, and yeah, there will be, I don't know, I There are always the way the touring works and the book works is that I don't commission, curate, or edit anymore. But there's a whole new bodies of work and people. So there's a collective called Academics Against Networking, for example, in Manchester, and that was set up entirely through being inspired by the book. There were also other short films, radio shows that use a vocabulary and concepts from the book. When I got really bleak, I actually thought, I don't know, I sometimes used to conceive of the whole book as some sort of suicide note or something like that. Like, if you want to know why I died. I don't know. It was actually when I was in Gwangju Biennial in 2010 that I actually conceived the whole book, because there were two, I know, like, you have the opening for this biennial, which was quite hyper, extrovert, supremacist, rave party or whatever, but the ones in Gwangju took it to the next level, with mega capital, mega American capital, and mega, I know there was something about South Korea which had taken this aspect of American capitalism but hyped it even further, and you see that in K-pop and stuff. So it was in that situation in Gwangju and find it unbearable. And plus you have this other side of Korea which is full of monasteries and streams, and that I actually started imagining conceiving Shy Radicals as a project, and then I got the book deal, like I think in 2014. I know sometimes I feel the book's, it's my publisher's best-selling book. It's been translated into other languages and it sells very well. And I win elections. The election was also done in Poland, because Slavs and Tatars biennial moved to Poland the following year in Warsaw, and I won the election again by even a larger margin, 80%. So winning those elections and the people writing to you saying you've given this vocabulary and conceptual outlook in which to recognize the oppression or alienation, that helps me survive. But I think in the exclusion of introversion, other forms of liberation are bound up. So the book's been adopted by autistic people and the neurodiversity movement, which is, I guess, a progressive liberation movement for people with autism, ADHD, affective disorders, dyspraxia, and that forging alliances with those movements helps. And there's other things, like it's not just, like other forms of quiet public spaces are threatened just through neoliberalism. So public libraries in Britain are being closed, or museums, or parks, or even cathedrals. And so I feel forging alliances with such other people's, through liberating one group, other people are bound up with that. Also within British art institutions, there's a recognition of neurodiversity. So for example, in Tate Modern, there's an actual quiet room, which quiet is protected, almost statutory, and anyone who's neurodiverse can go there. But I'd like that to be almost like, I don't know, statutory, or like a requirement, just like protecting biodiversity or wildlife or things like that. But that's unevenly recognized, but universally recognizing would be great. There is no forum for just writing grievances. I did think, what happens in the book is that things happen in real life where people have imitated fictional things in the book. One thing we actually did was we actually made an introvert emergency rescue hotline, and a lot of the dialogue is coming from that. But people, for example, would do little things like having introvert book swap during Freshers Week by some of the fans of the book, or that also when Jeremy Corbyn, who you see in the film, who was a big optimistic moment for me, who was a very good socialist progressive leader, within the branch of his Labour Party was something called neurodivergent Labour, and it was autistic trade unionists writing policy motions within to workplaces and employment by where their different ways of processing senses and being could be recognized and they could be seen equally within the workplace. So all those various things make me feel optimistic. So that's how I survive.
The musician that appears in the film is Arlo Parks, who's had incredible success this year with her debut album, Collapsed in Sunbeams. How did that collaboration come about? Can you both talk about this? And Tom, actually, her cover version of Creep actually became a single and a separate music video. So how did all of this come about?
So I used to, there's an area called Brixton in South London, which is a predominantly Afro-Caribbean area. And I used to see, there was a black woman who used to just sing Radiohead's Creep outside the tube station. So when I saw her, that was the basis in which I wanted a black person to sing, a woman to sing Radiohead's Creep. So I was, I like all these rereadings. So I grew up in the 1990s. I predominantly like white indie music. I even have a group on Facebook called People of Color Who Love White Indie Music. And I find in this sort of angsty-ridden, depressive lyrics, so there's lots of subtext. So if a black woman's singing, I don't have a perfect body, as the lines in Radiohead, or I don't belong here, there's different historical subtext within those songs, or ways in which they could be read. And then I also liked music like Joy Division, the depressive post-punk band in Britain, and Peter Hook from Joy Division's re-recording a lot of that songs. So he has Rowanna, who's another black British female musician, re-singing Ian Curtis's songs. But again, new subtexts come in those Joy Division songs, which cease to be just about individual self-pity and depressive men, but become about forms of historical and social oppression. But Tom's been working even more with Arlo Parks, and he even made like a little film as well with her, didn't you?
Yeah, I met her in where I live actually. She made a music video in my house. And then, so I literally met her a few years ago, very early on in her career. And Hamja and I had been having these conversations about what he just spoke about. And there was something, yeah, I think like the best moments that occurred in the film were just born out of these creative conversations, which then, you know, gave birth to an idea that we just sort of went for. And there was quite a lot of these moments, and quite a few of those moments aren't actually in the film because it was, you know, we could have made many different versions of this film. There was so many ideas in the early stages, but I just simply approached Arlo's manager with the project and that idea, and he presented it to her and she loved it. And a few weeks later, we were in a studio recording it, which was incredible. But I think it was just a very fortunate moment in an emerging artist's career where she had the flexibility to choose, make those decisions about projects she wanted to commit time to. Because yeah, if now that might not be so possible because she's on Ellen or whatever show on American TV.
I was in a house in Slovenia. It was Pira Ravinka's house, who does a Ravinka gallery. I think I said her name right or wrong, I don't know. And she just had the mainstream radio on, like mainstream FM radio, and then in the middle of Slovenia, and then Arlo Parks' song just randomly came on in daytime mainstream radio. And then I realized that she had really globally penetrated. But at the time of the film, she wasn't that famous, or...
no. She hadn't released her album or even an EP. I think it was just a few singles that she'd released.
Also, sorry, so Tom was shooting us in that graveyard and he made us look like we were talking. And then me and Arlo Parks had a really interesting conversation about how that song, Radiohead's Creep, was a favourite song of an autistic friend she had who committed suicide. And so it had a huge personal significance from her, and you can hear it. You can hear her heart as she sings. And then Tom played it to me. We were alone in a van, and it was raining, and yeah, it really like, yeah, it really like got straight to my heart, and really, I think contemporary art people who are all ironic and postmodern don't talk about things like sincerity of heart and spirit and soul, but yeah.
Yeah, some things are undeniable when I think.
Tom, in Great Britain, you have a wonderful tradition of mainstream rock bands who are very politically outspoken, like Idols, Wolf Alice, Manic Street Preachers. Now, the documentary film is a very well-established activist form. What do you think? Does the music video have some of that potential as well?
The music video, I'm not sure where the music video's potential is at the moment, because it's, you know, obviously we don't have the same platforms that existed at a time when you know, music videos could have an influence. I'm sure, yeah, you have to really go out your way to find, you know, like smaller bands and like research them. It's all there, but yeah, I'm not sure it has the same potential impact. But documentary, I think like bands are more open now to the overlap of creating music videos that overlap into some documentary form. So a few bands that I work with are really excited by the idea of maybe making like, you know, a short film, 6 to 8 minutes, including a few of the songs, but giving them some freedom to explore the ideas, themes of the album and the art like a bit deeper. I think that's an area that I'm really interested in myself.
Do we have another question from the audience? No. Did you guys, during the making of the film, ever think about making Shy Radicals into a full feature film?
We shot like 30 hours of footage or something like that, where we could have potentially. We shot 6 different films while making that one film. We also made other short films. So there's another film about Islamophobia, which is a conversation with me and a British Muslim poet called Sahaya Manzu Khan, which was turned into a separate film and was used as a film for a reading room for like a festival around, I think, kindness or political kindness. And I also used it. So another way I use the film is as the discursive thing around it. So I did a number of roundtables, one on Islamophobia at Jan van Eyck Academy and one in neurodiversity. Sorry, I'm going off the point again. So yeah, I think, but I would actually, like me and Tom actually, we discussed like possibility of live box sets, and like I think we wrote some, yeah, do you want to?
Was it box set? What do we talk about?
And when we wrote, I don't know if because we wrote a legal option, but that might, so we might work.
Oh yeah, I suppose I was really interested in the idea, and still am, of developing it into something bigger. We did begin the process. I think the pandemic interrupted that somewhat, and our priorities maybe were diverted back when we were having
remember that film. So one of the things we did, joining these two questions together, the early one about the pandemic, is that we had this idea in the middle of lockdown of Shy Radicals and Boris Johnson's government, which Britain was the worst death zone in the world, having a conversation and that being a potential film. And we even wrote up like a pitch for it. But yeah, now it's in limbo, but like there were other film ideas that we developed from...
Sent it to Channel 4, yeah.
Yeah, we sent it to Channel...
we went through that process.
Yeah.
Making films and having them funded is incredibly arduous process.
Yeah.
But I wish we could just do things ourselves and then, yeah.
The film has also developed a very big internationalist following. So when you go to the exhibition, there's a world map of everywhere from Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, to... There's people, there was, I think in the exhibition, there's people from Brazil, and they draw the book into existing social movements. So there's the Fora Bolsonaro movement against the neoliberal, bullying, authoritarian government in Brazil, and so there's vlogs in Spanish in Mexico City, and the selection of fans that Tom has, they're all the way from people from Sarajevo, to someone in Senegal, and like what I'd actually like to do is take all those localized narratives. So I met a fan from Beijing recently, and even though she had a very similar biography to me, like she played with the shy fat kid when she was at school and stuff, which is how I see myself sometimes, and she drew the narrative of Shy Radicals into Beijing as a city. So there's places in Beijing where people play chess in the public squares, and how she orientated around the city, but also we were thinking about Chinese New Year. So say if you had an introvert Chinese New Year, how that would be different. And I'd like at some point to bring some visual manifestation to all those multiple geographical narratives and visions. And yeah, I see that as one of the future directions of Shy Radicals.
The film is also very interesting, I think, because it plays sort of a game with the audience, because the audience has to decide how much irony is actually intended. So what is your approach to the concept of irony?
I actually don't know myself where the line between reality and fantasy is. Like, I don't know if the whole book is a revenge fantasy or just me. I don't even say I'm an artist or writer. Sometimes I say I'm Hamjo Ahsan, I'm commander-in-chief of the global revolutionary movement to overthrow extrovert supremacy, and I'm on a never-ending world tour to overthrow that, and I won't stop until it's finally overthrown. But that is actually what I've done for my life for the last like 4 years and more. Like my entire life is, I have a fan of my books. They happen to be a film director, a director of Biennial, or an institution leader. And that's how I earn my living. Like my entire, and that's how I think I've traveled and done events in 12 different countries. I've done 100 events in the last 4 years. But literally, I'll do that as long as there's a call, and as long as there are introverts who feel oppressed and alienated, and
yeah, I don't know where the line is either.
But I also think my experience with my brother was also, like police came into my bedroom in the middle of, in the morning on orders from the US government, went through my CD collection, by a country I'd never been to at the time. Like, there was aspects of the oppression and the war on terror which were surreal, or like Kafkaesque, or like just we weren't sure where that or even the way in which you're always imagined and like either through stereotypes or like the suspicion against the British Muslim minorities or Muslim minorities in Europe as potential bombs, or that's also a form of negative fantasy against you, and how to deal. I mean, even as an introvert, like people assume I'm not talking because I'm aloof, or I'm in a bad mood, or they can't see that I'm just like that because I'm content and that's my way of being. But that, again, like that's their fantasy projected onto me, and yeah, the whole like even we met earlier today, and you were asking me whether I was acting, and I was like, oh, I'm acting.
Yeah, but that question was connected to the way the film was shot, because it's very beautifully shot, and some scenes appear to be staged, especially the group scene where you have the session, or
that. I mean, that's one of my favorite bits in the film. So a lot of the people in the film are people in bands that Tom has worked with, but the beautiful piece of dialogue with the guy where he goes like, oh, I feel like I live in a different country. He's a part of a band called the Autistics, which is an all autistic rock band, and he just made that off the top of his head. And in fact, most of the dialogue is made off like through improvisation.
Yeah, that was entirely improvised.
Yeah.
That scene, that sequence was just lit like it was scripted, but it wasn't scripted.
Yeah.
We just
I think
fed.
what me and Tom did is we created improvisational structures by which people could communicate and be listened to with sincerity, confidence, and safety. And that includes the Introvert Emergency Rescue Hotline, in which we devised, and even the forms that is in the film was shot in a Quaker house. So people might in Slovenia be less familiar with Quakerism, but in Britain, Quakerism is like a progressive religious movement, and the main form of worship is sitting together in silence, which is something I used to join in. Sorry, I didn't just. But yeah, I think nearly everything in the film is improvised, or I think there's an element of collage. So there's a real beautiful booklet that Yasmín produced for the exhibition, and people might recognize it's like a collage of some of the sentences from those essays I'd written in the past as well. Yeah, but I think but I don't know if I'm, yeah.
I don't think you're acting. I think there's a sincerity, obviously, to everything that you do.
Were there any actors in the film, though? Like, because I know some of them there were people in bands, but there were a couple of actors, weren't there?
Just one actor.
Yeah. All right. Who was that?
Yeah, the guy that's leading the session.
Oh, okay.
It's called Paul. He's in Emmerdale.
So Emmerdale's a proper British soap opera. Yeah, like EastEnders, Neighbours. Do people?
Yeah, he's from Emmerdale. That's the only actor. But no, I worked for about 8 years with a director called Julian Temple, and I learnt a lot from him. He crosses, he combines the reality and fiction in interesting ways. And in a film about Ibiza, he had a guy from a band called the Happy Mondays called Bez. He had Bez play an ancient Ibicencan god called Bez in the actual film. And I think there's some really exciting new ideas that come out of playing with those two things. New things emerge, new meanings emerge. So it's not necessarily I think something funny can also have profound meaning, and that's what I see in Hamjo's book and his work. There's just great access. It makes it really fun and accessible, but then underneath there's a much deeper meaning, if you want to go there.
I think, do Laibach mean it when they? I sort of, yeah. I don't. There's also this play with aspects of, I did actually read the Constitution of North Korea when I wrote the Constitution of Radicals.
Do we have the last question from the audience? Do we have time for the last question? No. Yeah. Tom, you're working with the production company Black Dog Films, which is, many people don't know, this is one of the greatest music video and short film companies in the world, I would say. How inspiring is it to be working alongside legendary film directors such as Jonas Shinola? Is that a very inspiring environment to make your own music videos and short films?
Yeah, I haven't met them, but I'd like to. It's great company. Yeah, obviously to be at and to be in. So
it's also Black Dog Films is a branch of Ridley Scott's production company. So when Tom took me to the office for Black Dog, you see all these clapperboards, and they're from Thelma Louise, Blade Runner, Gladiator. And then you ask at the reception, oh, are those the real clapperboards from the film? And they're like, yeah, they are. And then we had a little office meeting, and they take you around the office, and then there's the suit from Alien, and there's the helmets from Gladiator, and they are the real things from the set, and Blade Runner. And yeah, that was quite a glamorous thing to walk into for an office.
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming environment to have meetings in, but it's obviously a great place to be for making films. Yeah, it's inspiring to see the other directors' work.
I think people might know the Bjork video for All Is Full of Love with the robots kissing, but that was one of your company's videos.
Yeah.
No, but he's not as good as the Slovenian music director Kukla, who I do actually think is the most inspiring. I said to Kukla, like, if I don't meet you before I leave, I don't feel complete. You'll find out who Kukla is. She's inspired by MIA, who's actually also in the film. That protest outside the Home Office, that's MIA singing for Julian Assange. And MIA is also from Tutin, which is where most of the film was shot. It's like a South Asian area. And I watched Kukla's Sisters, and I thought if there was going to be a sequel to Shy Radicals, I wanted Kukla to direct it too. The Tom's great too, but he's not as cool as Kukla. But that's not saying Tom's not cool. Just Kukla's just next level cool, right?
Hamja, will we see the release of any of the other short films you made during the sessions for Shy Radicals?
Yeah, we can. There's the one on Islamophobia, which we could screen at any point. What else did we?
That's it. That's the only one that's.
Yeah. But also, a lot of there's a video screen in the world map, which you see in the exhibition. A lot of that was shot for the film, so the clips of people voting and taking part in the referendum. It was mashed up with local Slovenian music footage and stuff like that. There's also films being made all the time. Some of them are quite trashy. So there was a film called Club Mars about Mars being colonized by extrovert supremacist ballroom rave party people. And it was turned into some trashy news report. But that's not only marked in it's not only in the mashup video in the map, but Yasmín did this really cute thing where she actually marked it on the ceiling of the exhibition, so you can actually club Mars and the resistance to extrovert colonization. And so the future of the book is also like this autonomous series of works inspired by the book too, and of the film and its offshoots, and that just happens totally independently of me. And long may that continue.
I would like to thank both of my guests. Tom, thank you for joining us. Hamja, thank you.
Cool.
Hopefully, hope to see you in Ljubljana sometime very soon again.
So, yeah. This actually it ends my. So this is the 7th time I've been to Ljubljana in 2.5 years, and I had no idea. I've never even been to a former communist country. I've never been to this side of Europe. I've never been to former Yugoslavia. And yeah, I feel so enheartened by the city, and I feel very much part of a fabric, and I feel like it's woven into my heart.
Thank you. Good night. I have to do this, but you can. So the book's on sale and I'm signing copies, and there's some there. You can also follow Tom on @ShyRadicalsFilm, and you can see the letter Tom personally wrote to Radiohead. So they gave us permission to put Creep in the film. It's really cute. It's really like a teenage fan letter. And Shy Radicals on Instagram, and #ShyPower is actually a real thing. And sorry, another hashtag. There's a hashtag Vote Aspergerstan, which covers the election which took place here, which I won. So I'm not only commander-in-chief, I'm a democratically elected president of this introvert revolution in Ljubljana Biennial.
Yeah, and